Good morning, third grade. Today we're going to keep working on that Schulten project that we started using tints and shades of paint. And I think today is a good day to hopefully finish up the sky and then also begin working on the buildings. So let me show you now what comes after you're done with that sky and you're ready to start painting in the buildings. Because before we paint those buildings, first we need to split them up into squares just like we did with the sky. So before we start talking about paint, you're going to need to use a pencil again, and just like we did up here, you're going to make some big squares or rectangles. And since we're using just our hands and we're freehanding these things, it's not too important that they're all perfect looking, but you do want them to look like obvious rectangles or squares. Now I know some of us made windows already, so I'm going to tell you right now that it's probably going to be easier to actually paint over your building's windows if you have them, because then we'll go back in and add them after the paint on all of our buildings is dry. As usual, we're going to share water containers at each table, but we each need our own paintbrushes, paper towel, which is way over here on the right. And once we start painting in the buildings, we're each probably going to need our own paint trays. Just like before, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my regular old untinted, unshaded bottle color of paint. And obviously I'm using red here. So I'm going to randomly paint in some of my squares completely red before I start to tint them with the white paint. Just like we talked about when we were working on the sky, it's a good idea to have a placemat paper underneath your painting, especially when you're working on the edges like I'm doing right now. That way that placemat paper catches all your extra paint. Alright, I'm ready to start tinting that paint, so I am going to wash out my brush and give it a good dry before I start to add any white to my paint. And I'm going to actually switch to a little bit larger paintbrush just to get a good pile of red going over here, and then start to slowly mix some of the white to it and then paint the squares. So as I'm mixing this up, just a quick, easy reminder, take your time. This project isn't going to look nearly as cool as it could if you aren't slowing your hand down and trying your hardest to paint in those squares. And when you paint them in, you definitely want to paint them in side to side, top to bottom. We don't want any white space showing through. Alright, I'm going to add a little more white to my little tint pile of paint here. And while I'm mixing this up, let me explain why I started on the left-hand side of my painting. I started on the left-hand side because I'm a right-handed painter. That means I don't have to worry about dragging my hand through any paint if I start on the wrong side, which means if you're a right-handed painter like me, you're probably going to want to start painting your buildings on the left first. If you're a left-handed painter, you would reverse everything and you'd want to start painting the buildings on the right-hand side and work your way to the left. I'm ready to start shading that paint. Before I shade that paint, I want to make sure that brush is nice and clean and I've given it a good dry. And if all I have left is some pile of red like this, add just a little bit of black and you can start to shade that whole leftover pile of paint. Please remember that adding black too fast will turn your paint very, very dark, and it's almost impossible to begin to lighten up at that point. Add a little bit more black now, and I'm going to finish up this shaded piece. This is a really good place to stop and talk about how dark your paint can actually get. Obviously, if you think about how dark that red is, it's going to be really hard to see the black outline that we're going to do in the last few steps of this project. So you're probably going to want to think about avoiding getting too dark with your shades of paint. But each one of your buildings now should be a different color. So if I were to continue painting this one, I would go with probably a green here, so it'd go red and then green, and then maybe I'd use another lighter color for this building right here in the middle, so maybe red, green, yellow. I don't want to do any more blue buildings because I have a blue sky. I think this one would look really nice as a purple, and then maybe an orange here on the end. And then I think down here in front, maybe do a little light green building for this one down here. So start to think about that, because as you split up your buildings, each one of these things needs to be a different color. At the end of class, everybody knows that these things have wet paint on them, so they should be going in the drying rack. And we also know that we need to each clean out our own paintbrushes, and that includes drying them so they don't get ruined. Your paint plates, yes, sadly, we're gonna put those paint plates in the trash along with your paper towel. And the placemat papers, we're gonna switch these out after Thanksgiving, so go ahead and toss these in the trash today, because when we come back from break, we're gonna have some new placemat papers. Since I won't see you again until after Thanksgiving, have a great break. Although I'll be here Monday, I'll see you in the building, but I won't see you in class. So enjoy your days off, enjoy your holiday, and I will see you when I see you.